I usually say something about them in church, but I did not today. But we'll be looking at them again here in a little bit. So if you want one, we got them in back. It's noon. So welcome to, that's, what changed between the 5 seconds that I just had it on before? All right. So we're going to kick off here our Summit of Summit Town Hall. Let's start with a word of prayer. Gracious God, Heavenly Father, we give you thanks and praise for our Sabbath day of rest and worship. Pray that you bless our deliberations today. We give you thanks for the guidance that you've given us over all the past years, but particularly last year. And we look for your blessing and guidance and the belief that we're following your purpose for us in the next as well. These things we pray in your Son's name. Amen. So if you're, who's never been to one of these before? Raise your hand. Okay, so let me just give you a little bit of background. Even prior to our structure change, I started having what I'd call town hall meetings because as we were discussing making changes, to be quite honest, to many of the things around here, there's a recognition that dropping that on people in the voters meeting wasn't particularly helpful, but that we don't have a gathering of the church, the whole church, other than worship, to discuss these things. And so we started doing the town halls. Normally, I would bribe you with food to try to get more people to attend. Now that we live stream it, I'm surprised anybody's here, but no, I'm glad that you are. So we've been doing this 7, 8 years now, I think. And then since the structure change a couple of years ago, 3, actually, will it be 4 now in February? Time flies, doesn't it? 4 in February. And then since the structure change, it's taken on, I don't know if greater importance is exactly it, but the voters' meetings are really by and large about the board's communication with the owners/voters. But that doesn't mean that there's not an occasion where I need to talk to you and give you a chance to ask questions and stuff like that. And so that's been kind of combined in the habit of this doing of a town hall. And so we're going to kick off today's here right away. This is kind of a little bit of where we're going. I'm going to talk about the state of the churches before I get into the state of ours. I'm going to talk about the present, our new normal, looking forward, what's going on with digital and kind of, so some of these are from last year. So I said last year we would return to normal, and we still haven't returned to normal. So maybe I should just drop that concept entirely, but we'll get started here. So state of the churches. Are you motioning me something? Oh, okay, yeah. So if you have a question, we are going to want you to wait for Sarah, or they can't hear the question on the live stream, and I always forget to repeat it. So, okay. Anything else? All right, so state of the churches. So there's a group called the Unstuck Group. They're a group of church consultants, for whatever that's worth. But they've been doing this interesting thing for a number of years, just looking at the trends of churches. And we started using their stuff just as stuff to reflect upon during COVID. We hadn't really, I don't think, come across them before. So this information is from them. They release a new one every single quarter. If you just go to Unstuck Church, their website, you can subscribe for free if you have your own interest in this. But I'm going to share with you how 2021 ended. In-person average weekly attendance in America was down 34%. And that's from the previous year, not from previous years. It was down 34% from last year. Online service views were up 205%. So more and more people started to find that to be helpful or useful. Number of people baptized down 49%. Number of new members added down 18%. Adult and student volunteering down 3%. Total general fund giving down 1.5%. And that's interesting because 2020 giving was actually up for churches, but it went down a little bit over this last year. Now I'm going to talk about some of these particularly throughout it. Some of these we don't track exactly the same way. Like we don't track our adults and students serving broken out exactly like that. But I can tell you anecdotally, because you've heard me say it before, we have wrestled with our volunteers coming back. All the other stuff I'm going to share with you in one way or another about us. Any questions about that? All, yeah, Christian churches, yep, that answer their survey. Yeah. So let's talk about the present here at Summit of Peace. I've been sharing this graph now for I don't know how many years. This is our trend since we started. Here's our baptized membership. This is our confirmed membership. This is our average worship attendance. So just a reminder that in 2016, we had the Great Rapture. No, that's when we switched church management software, and we had discovered that back in 2002, 150 mystery people were added to the attendance so we could get the membership so we could get an LCF loan. And then it just those 150 just kept getting moved forward in the years, and they never actually existed. So we never really actually had as many as we thought we had. That was 50 people a year for over 3 years. So that's kind of our real numbers at this point. And so you'll see membership continue to decline, baptized climbing, confirmed climbing, average worship not. So this is 2020. Our in-person worship in 2020 was 113. Our live stream worship was 194. In 2021, in-person worship was 139. Live stream was 115. But just so you know, I always share this with you. This is our running 5-year. So back in 2017, we were 527, 413, and you can see we had 40 that year, 25 the next, 13 the next, 27 last year, and 42 this year. That puts us at our 634, 474 for membership. This is our attendance. We hit an almost all-time high in 2017 in worship attendance, and declining since then. And you can make of 2020 what you want, but you'll see even for 2021, not returning like they had been. 2019 was the first year that 1030 had outgrown 8, but the people coming back, it's now actually gone back. So questions about any of those at this point? I'm going to kind of talk about my feelings about them. You've heard me say in this and other places that the ABC, attendance, buildings, and cash, is something every church should keep track of, but it doesn't really tell you very much. What it's telling you is important, but it's not of the utmost important. There's other things that tell you things that are better. So, I mean, from these two things, we're growing, pleased, that sort of thing. Our return, or the people returning, is of some concern to me, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. Some particular things I want to talk to you about is our financials, our staffing, and what ministry, our 2021 ministry. Oh wait, I think that's a slide I didn't update. That should say 2022 ministry going forward. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at. So here's our 2021 generosity. We break down, we've been doing this now for a number of years, where we break it down via our mission statement, with the percentages. We spent 51% of our budget in the Grow in Faith area. Grow in Faith covers worship and large group stuff, education, Sunday school, all those sorts of things. Now, to be fair, when you take something like a staff person's salary, even though they do all of those things, it's hard to divide up their salary. So we always put staff in growth, and so it's always a little bit out of, it makes it a little bit out of proportion, but not entirely, right? So, but we do spend more on in that area. Sharing the Faith, this is our groups ministry, so that's our youth groups, women's, life groups, experience group. Living the Faith is our outreach, so we spent 23% of our budget on that, and I emphasize budget because I'm going to show you something else here in a little bit. And of course, nothing really means anything if you don't know. I'll show you here in a minute the last year's. So our generosity to our restricted fund, you'll see, is almost 50% then is for the Live the Faith items. On the share is, we had quite a bit for women's and encore this year. And then 22, we still spent some money because we updated live stream and music. And so a couple of different ways. So you'll see how our restricted fund giving then is spent. So in 2021, general fund giving was 604,690. Restricted was 121,446 for the largest giving year in Summit's history, 726,136. Now, here's 2020. I didn't do all the pie charts. I just did the basic. Our 2020 was 580,760 plus 97,220 in restricted fund giving for a total of 677,980. So this is an area where I have to be honest. I'm a little conflicted because obviously I love the fact that we had such a generous year, but we always wrestle with this sort of we budget for what we think we have to do and operate, and then we try to do outreach and some other projects which work on people's hearts. This is a good thing. But if restricted keeps outgrowing budgeted giving, it puts us in a financial problem. So we actually ended this year under what we needed by about 21K in the red. 21K in the red. Now, there's two reasons for that. I said this at the voters meeting, I think as well, and so I have to stand here in all humility because it's really, really stupid. We made our 2020 budget because our PPP loan was forgiven. And I did not account for that when I made our budget increase and decided to bring on another pastor for this year. Now, to be honest, I did think we would grow, which we did, but it did not equal what we needed to make budget, right? So we ended a little bit in the red this year. I think, what is that, 2.5% or something of budget? Aren't you glad how you asked if I'd have any questions for you? And I said no, and now I've asked you 4 questions in a row. So that's kind of our picture of where we're at, at the moment. This is our financial history going back to 2016 when we took in just over 500,000. We were asking for a little over 9,700 a week, where it's grown. So this year's budget, we have increased. I made a couple of. We actually, what was our original? 680 or something? The one that I presented to the board in November. And then we have since slashed that. But there's a couple important things in there that I felt we had to keep. We had been pushing, kind of kicking the can down the road with staff and their raises and stuff. I did 6.5% raises this year because I felt it was important that we try to keep up with inflation. We can't keep kicking that down the road. And I'll be honest with you, I had staff come and ask if they could get a part-time job. So I just felt that was a high enough priority. So that was one of the decisions we made. It's a National Youth Gathering year, so there's some money for that. But they've actually they're going to cut their trip by a couple of days, and so that helped our budget. We had a paid staff position we were going to do part-time, but cut that out. So for 2022, we're looking at 621, 588, and you'll see that's almost $12,000 a week that we'll be looking for. Questions on that? Any financial questions? Yeah, wait. Wait for the mic. Sorry.
Giving per member is always an important metric as well. Do you have that later? Or?
No, I don't. We actually do it by family when we do it instead of by member. Family group. I find that to be a more useful tool, but I still don't have that. I didn't put that in here.
Quick metric: how many members are you claiming for 2022? There it was. 634 baptized, 474 confirmed. Okay. That's less than $2,000.
Yep.
Per baptized, it's 1,000. And so for confirmed, it's 1,300, which is.
No, and we did this, is it 3 years ago, Lori? We actually did a breakout of, we put them in buckets, and we had, what was the percentage who gave nothing? It was 15% or something, right? Yeah, and then we had the next bucket was our largest one, which was 500, under 500 a year. Yeah. So, and that we continue to do that, wrestle with it a little bit. Our long time standing stewardship emphasis of financial peace was not one that translated well to COVID. So we look to get those up and going, but looking at that stewardship education is a big part of that, because you're right. It's, to be honest, I don't know. It's something that a church should always make its people aware of, but now 20 some years in, I don't know if it's ever, no matter what I've done, it's always 80-20, right? 20% of the people give 80% of the money, do 80% of the work. And it's, during COVID, it's 95-5, by the way. Again, I'm beating up the choir. So just to remind you, as I like to do every year, I think I do it at voters too, on CCB, right, which is summitoofpeace.ccbchurch.com. If you've forgotten, lost your login, email Sarah. That's her favorite thing to do, is help people get logged on to CCB. If you go to the groups on the side, you see their groups, and you go down to the second one, Summit of Peace members, and you click on it and go to that page. It has those tabs across the top, and you see the one that says files. If you click that one, our financial secretary uploads every month's financials. So you can always go and look at what's going on at any point in time in the church, where we're spending money, what the status kind of thing is. So any other questions about it? Okay. New normal, talking about personal discipleship, looking forward, digital campus, and see if we can return to that. I want to talk about personal discipleship. So just give you a reminder, this is prior even to the structure change. The Board of Elders and the pastors spent a number of years kind of wrestling with some kind of deep questions. And part of it actually goes back to what I mentioned before, which is if you only operate from ABCs, you're not really knowing everything you know about your church. And so connected with our new vision statement that we rolled out, we believed that it was important to have what is termed, and we got this from a book that we did called Simple Church, that you have marks of discipleship, things that you are trying to do. Now, to some degree, when you're talking about a relationship with God, there's some things that are hard to measure. But on the other hand, the New Testament is pretty clear that there's things that show that you are a Christian and growing as a Christian, right? Things that are demonstrable. Could you be faking all of them? Yes. So that's my caveat, that at the end of the day, really only God knows. But having said that, there's still demonstrable things that indicate a life of discipleship. And so we came up with this. Out of thanksgiving for everything God has given them in Jesus Christ, disciples of Jesus Christ, at Summit of Peace, humbly strive to help everywhere. Help everyone grow in their knowledge of, trust in, and commitment to the Lord through worship, Bible study, and giving. And this is telling you what's in the bucket of grow, in case you were wondering. Share their faith with the people in their lives, especially encouraging and supporting the family of faith through life groups. This is why our share part of our ministry is really our groups ministry. This is where we get to connect, support, and care for one another apart from just in worship. Live out their faith in ways that visibly and physically share the love and mercy of Christ with their families, friends, community, and world through vocation, service, and outreach. And so we talk about serving at SOP, in SOP, and as SOP. And one of the things we really wanted to make an effort towards, if I can be blunt, after I first came here, was a church that was very, that had many, many good things about it, but it was typical of American churches in that it was largely everything was run for itself, right? So that's why the goal was to move beyond and do more, and not to bore you with all the details, but the share part is important because most American Christians who are committed Christians, their spiritual life, their spiritual disciplines do not support the effort they try to put in their local church. What I mean by that is they skip over the being fed too much. I know that sounds strange, but when we wrestled with this as a staff, we all confessed that we did it too, right? When you're at your busiest, you skip prayer, you skip or whatever it is. And so having, particularly in a life group, having people that can love and care and support you, that pour into you, allows you to be able to pour into others. And so that's why that middle one, we believe, is so important and vital, even though it still seems kind of internal. So the marks of discipleship also give us what we consider to be our discipleship process. And I told you, if you were with us originally, that I envision one day this becoming a circle. But at the moment, by and large, still to this day, 90% of people come to us through experiencing worship first, right? So the first exposure, the first way they step into the disciple-making process with us is in the area of grow. And that's why our church programming is set up in such a way to try to move them next to groups, in particular our small groups, right? So I don't know if you've ever caught on to this, but every time a new member class is over and we do welcome new members, what is also starting on that Sunday? Sign-ups for life groups. That's not an accident, because we want to get them involved and connected to a church. I'm going to say more about this in my areas of concern, but all the data in the world says if you only come to church and worship, sooner or later, you'll leave. If that's the only way you ever involve in your church is putting your butt in the seat on Sunday, you will eventually stop going to that church, right? So, any questions about our marks of discipleship or discipleship process? I didn't actually read these, but just so as a reminder, grow is worship, adult Bible study, Sunday school, and our teaching, what you might think of as teaching things, although confirmation obviously as well. Share is the areas that operate in smaller groups that are above just worship and learning, right? This is encouragement, this is service together, those sorts of things. And then living the faith. And so that's where you see our distinction, where you can serve at SOP, that's Sunday service. You can serve in SOP, and by in we just mean it's one of our programs. And then you serve as SOP, where? Everywhere else, wherever God sends you, right? So those are the at and in. Yeah. Here's life groups for this year. I didn't put the new one, I didn't put last year's in this one, but I can tell you actually we're down. So we had reached a point prior to COVID where all of those were 12s. And no matter how hard I tried, I could never seem to get more than that. And I came to the realization or the belief, and again, this is anecdotal, that with people's lives being the way they are, is we're never going to get more. So if we have 12 groups of 12 people, how many is that each time around? That seems to be the percentage of people who can do that in our church at the same time with what else is going on in their life, right? This is why our life groups do take breaks, because they recognize that people have different seasons. And so, you'll have people who'll do 1 a year, 2 a year, 3 a year. Sometimes they'll take a break, sometimes they won't, right? It's kind of all over the place. But there is a big segment who have never tried, and I'm not sure how I'm going to ever make them try. But we were, last measure, we had gotten to 68% of people had tried our life group. But they went down over the last 2 years for a couple of reasons, I believe. One is COVID. People disliked. How many of you tried one on live stream or like Zoom or something when we did it? Yeah. I think it was helpful, but it's not sustainable, right? Because of part of the value of getting together. So I think so some people stopped because of that, and then some people didn't start again that usually did one, and that included some of our leaders. Some of our leaders needed breaks themselves. During COVID, one of the biggest mistakes we made is we always used to bring the leaders in prior to every round of life groups to do a training. But we couldn't gather, and we couldn't think about how to do that virtually, so we were just like, well, you all are leaders, keep doing it. And that was a mistake. So going into 2022, we have to get better about equipping and carrying those leaders. We're reading a book as a staff that Ron gave me, Future Church, and we finished a section that caused us all to ask ourselves this question: have we been doing this format for too long? So I don't want to bore you with all the details, but if you go back in time, we originally did life groups in this way. So that was when Pastor Roberts was still here. We did all this research. I mean, you wouldn't believe the books we read, the different churches we visited. We visited all these churches, went to Best Practice, went all these places, and we couldn't find a single model that we thought would work for Summit, right? So we kind of created our own, and it was because Summit didn't have any history in life groups that we wanted to give them we wanted to inoculate you. Apparently we've inoculated the whole church against life. No. We wanted to give you these little small doses of life groups, right? Acknowledging the seasons of life so you could take breaks and things like that. We also, even if your group decided to all sign up together, you couldn't just assume to keep your group together. We always make you redo signups. And hopefully you can see why. One of them would be, it doesn't do us any good to have a whole bunch of new members who are ready to join a life group for them all to be closed because they're full of current members, right? So we had to force that. But what we are starting to wonder is, have we waited too long for the next step? We also wanted to avoid cliques. You'll hear lots and lots of churches who've done small groups for a long time. Sometimes they struggle with a group staying together, that it becomes a clique. And again, no new people can get in it. So we kind of wanted to avoid that. But we're to the point now where we actually are wondering if the people who've participated for a long time in these they're ready for the next step. They're actually, I don't want to say bored, but it just doesn't meet them where they're at. So we're still trying to wrestle through if that might be part of the cause. We're talking about conducting a survey, asking particularly people who were in them who aren't anymore, were they not valuable or whatever the case might be. So this is probably one of my biggest areas of concern, and I'll explain why. So the other thing, this book we're reading, so I should say this. If you don't know me by now, I love reading lots and lots of books. I don't ever just read a book and say, this is 100% right, we should do every single thing in this book. And largely the best books are reframing something we've already always known. It's not new information a lot of times. It's reframing what we've already known in a way that now makes us think about it differently, right? So in this current book we're reading, it's made us realize, you've heard me say for a long time, right, that we plan on Summit of Peace, one day becoming Summit of Peace ministries that would include discipleship groups, house churches, other things outside of worship. But the struggle we've always had, and we've talked about this with different language though, is balancing what is basically offering programs that will make people come with getting them to take the steps towards discipleship. Does that make sense? And I'll just be honest, this is my view of things. The amount of people who have not returned, and there's some portion that's health, I'm sure, but this is what I think. A big portion of people who used to attend here have said, the services that you offered, I discovered in COVID, are not worth coming back for. Right? The programs, the whatever it might be. And so I have some deep concerns for the people who haven't returned. Now, so there's a couple things to be fair, right? There's health things. There's also, I was thinking about this, all churches are unique and stuff like that. I was reflecting upon my parish in Nebraska because it was such a unique one because you had all these families who had been there forever, right? I'd be sitting in an elders meeting and I'd be like, we got to replace Bob on the board of elders. How about Hank? And they'd be like, Hank can't be on with Chuck because 3 generations ago, Chuck's grandpa's cattle got on his land and they don't talk to each other. And you're like, what? So you have this, sometimes you know each other too well, right, kind of thing, and it can cause different conflicts. So, we got a big bunch of, we have people for whom church is important, but I also believe we still, but if I were to have them in front of them and say, is God not important or anything's important? They'd say, all my family are Christians, my friends are Christians, I have Christian support, right? So I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying about them, not finding any value, but the show on Sunday is not enough for them to come back, right? And that forces us to ask a really, really important question, right? Or a number of questions. The degree to which we're truly discipling them well, or even though we've talked all these years about, so this is one of the things I like about this book, not that you care, is I also don't trust books that are, that was the old way, and so you should burn it to the ground. This is the new way, and the only thing that'll work. I don't like that. So what I like about this current one is it acknowledges that still in America, and I believe this in suburban America, people church shop. Programs are good. I want to give you opportunities for your children to get to know other Christians, even if they're just playing, right? Or what? No, I don't want you to hear me saying programs are bad, but if we offer only the same programs that the world gives, they're going to offer better than we do, right? So our programs have to be specific and they have to lead towards discipleship. So it's making us ask ourselves our questions about that. So I have a deep concern for those who haven't returned, and it's for a number of reasons. One is the explosion of mental health issues since COVID. It's among the young, it's among the old. I am not a psychologist or trained in that way, but I think a couple of different things are going on there, right? There's this angst in the world. If you are one who's kind of in COVID withdrawn, to protect yourself, even if it's health-wise, all you have now is social media and television, which of course are the healthiest things to pour into our life, right? And so it creates this anxiety, this stress, this depression, these things. And if any of you have struggled with depression, one of the things you know is once you're in it, now the hardest thing in the world is to see the path out of it, right? So I can send them all the letters in the world and call them and say, you should be in church. But I have deep concern for their mental health, right? This is why we started when we brought Mark on, he and TJ split up, basically calling everybody over a certain age, right? The people who, because of health-wise, we thought were isolating because we didn't want this to happen. That's why they did that, if you didn't know, and you got a call from them. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about mental health, and it's not just those people, but even people who are going out in their everyday life can still suffer from the effects and the mental health issues. And so my concern is then depression tends to send you into an echo chamber. Now, whether you have depression or not, operating in an echo chamber is very, very dangerous. So if you think about it this way, I don't care what your view is on COVID and masking and vaccines and the election and whatever it is. But if the only thing you read, look at, and listen to already supports what you already believe, it is not healthy, even if you are right, which you're not. But even if you were right, it's still not healthy. If for no other reason, for the last one, you cannot love people you do not understand. If you don't understand where they're coming from, you will not be able to love them and understand them first. What do we always say? People want to be understood, right? So they can be loved. They want to know that you want to hear their story before you get to tell them the story, right? That's the thing. And so I'm concerned about the echo chamber, and this is not just an old at-risk person. We got, I'll be honest, one of the smartest people I know in the world that attends our church, really kind of withdrawn because of COVID, kind of discovered how nice that kind of new lifestyle is. And one of my biggest concerns for that person is now, they're smart, but now the only opinion they listen to is, guess what? Their own, which is a very smart and very informed opinion, but still is not always 100% correct, right? So I'm concerned about the echo chamber, but that's the last one, and I mentioned this in second service. If you went to 8 o'clock, I left it out because I was only planning on doing it here, but then it just felt right in the moment. I can't speak to those who haven't re-engaged, why they're not seeing value, why they're hesitant, whatever it might be. Maybe they were in a life group and it doesn't give them what they need anymore. And those are real things that I don't want to dismiss. But the most worrying thing for me is when we move away from at least it's on the table when we discuss. Does someone need me? Should I be going back and in worship or in life group or serving at the food bank or whatever during this time, not because of what I'm getting out of it, but because someone needs me? And that's my deepest concern around the areas, again, of life groups. And our care ministers have experienced this, I think, to some degree as well, as they're kind of making their calls to people. They all have stories of people who love to hear from them, and people who to this day have never returned a call or email or whatever. And that's fine. That is what it is. But an element of our core has to be that we are people who ask ourselves, at least as part of the consideration, who needs me? Right? Not always and only is this thing offering something that I want, that I need. Does that make sense? And so if anything, my opinion is really that COVID revealed a truth about broken human nature, right? I'm not saying it caused it, created it, or anything, but it created conditions where it gave us an excuse to stay home and only do and hang out with the things that we wanted to hang out and do, right? Now, again, I'm preaching to the choir, right? And even if you're watching, I'm probably preaching because you at least want to, be informed and engaged. So our biggest concern and question is how do we connect to those people who haven't returned? And really, I mean, it is self-serving, I guess. There's no way around it. But we are generally concerned about them, right? And I'm going to talk about later the other group that's kind of interesting about it, but I'll save it. And then living the faith. This is, these are the outreach things we do. So now this is kind of interesting, depending on how you want to look at it. So we've got the ABCs numbers that we measure. I share with you the engagement. This is largely what the info sheet you get is. That's our engagement, the way people are engaged. It doesn't necessarily measure what you accomplish. Now, if you're curious about this, technically, I'm required to give a monitoring report to the boards on the ends, the things they want me to accomplish. And I don't, any of the board members who are here can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's as tangible of an output as I think is really possible in a church to measure. And this is a big chunk of them, right? Because part of our ends is to physically demonstrate Christ's love with those who in need, in physical, tangible, I don't remember exactly, but basically something along those lines, right? And so this is actually, this is measurable. Now again, how do we measure the effect? So one of the interesting things that we do is we actually ask every group that we work with their opinion. Does Summit of Peace help you accomplish your ends, reach these people, right kind of thing? So we're at least getting some kind of feedback. But that's our measure of living the faith. Guess what else we got this year? Yay! So a couple of things. We've had some questions since then, so I might as well tell you. So the interesting thing, and this is just a technology thing, I don't know if you noticed, the sign doesn't do that when you look at it, but every time you take you can't take a picture where it's not pixelated like that. I don't know whether that's some kind of science thing that I don't understand. How many of you were hoping it was bigger? Yeah, everybody was. That's dictated by the city. You can have a sign that's a total size and only, and they dictate what portion of it can be digital and which can be your static, yeah. Tall, yeah, all these things. So that was as good as we could get. I mean, I'm still happy. We right away had people commenting and seeing stuff. But you'll notice it doesn't say Lutheran Church on there, and I had some people ask me why. And the truth is, I'm not ashamed of being Lutheran, but I also I could have left it off. It would not be out of the realm of possibility that I would leave it off. Because in this modern world, to be honest, right, it would be like if someone said, do you want to go to my synagogue or my Jewish school, you'd say, I'm not. What would you say? I'm not. So even if they're Christian, you may not think this way, but a big portion of the world says, why would I go to that church? That's not why I left it off. It didn't fit. Or if it did, look how small the summit, you just see how much smaller everything would have had to been. And we thought it was more important to have the website on there than Lutheran Church. So we'll see what Luther says when I tell him that to his face in heaven, that I thought it was more important to have the website. He might, yeah, I don't know. So that's the sign. So we're excited about that. Kind of an area of need of ministry and staffing. I talked to you a little bit about this last year. Some of it continues to trickle forward. We really need our volunteers to come back. I said it even last year, and it hasn't changed. I'm worried about our staff, the amount of that's placed upon them. And I'll be honest, and I've said this to them, so I'm not throwing them under the bus. Every staff person I've ever worked, and this includes myself when I started being a pastor, it is easier to do yourself than to recruit and train someone to do it. The problem is then your bandwidth of what you can do as an organization is this big. So part of it is the staff took it on, and now they struggle with giving it back away as well, and we've had this conversation. But we also, they feel exhausted asking and not getting answers, right, or people to step up. So we need that to come back. This is how we kind of direct, our ministries are broken out if you haven't seen it. Director of Operations, Sarah, see how she's on top? Everyone always says she's the boss anyway. They love saying that in front of me, they say it in front of me like, what am I going to, am I going to deny that? I mean, half of my day is spent saying, Sarah, where's this? Or how do we do this? Or what? I mean, you're not telling me anything when you call her the boss. I don't know. So there's Sarah, preaching, help with Pastor PJ and Pastor Mark, Katie with worship, Pastor Mark and Pastor PJ in member care, children and youth, Alexi Palazzari. It's still January, so it says Lori Anderson. She's done at the end of the month. And she's training her replacement at the moment, but she and Dirk are taking that step forward of fulfilling their dream of moving to Edinburgh for however long I say she can. But it's going to be for a while. And facility manager, Pastor Jacoby. So actually, I'll back up and say a couple things about it. So, and I told Pastor PJ and Pastor Mark this ahead of time, so this is not a shock to them. But I want to be candid with you guys. So, we ran behind in the budget. So we need to make that up and grow in this year. If we don't, I mean, anybody who's run a business, what's the easiest place to save money? Yeah. And so, we'll get into, I mean, it's not like we're broke or anything, but we'll get into the year. But if we don't start trending in the right direction, we'll have to make a decision about one of them. That's just the way things stand. And I'll tell you, I don't know if terrifying is the right word, but it makes me nervous. And I mean, you guys know me. I tend to be quite transparent, right? I had been feeling quite a bit of burnout for a number of years. I'd asked the elders for a sabbatical, which they agreed to do. We were implementing it when Pastor Roberts took a call, and we have since then not had staff that can cover one. So if I was feeling burnout before COVID, that has only gotten worse. So believe me when I tell you, I don't want to have to do that, both personally and for the church, right? But I'm just being honest about where things stand at that moment. So, and it's not, we're going to work on communication and stewardship and all those sorts of things, see where the Lord leads us. But that's where things stand at that. I should stop. Any questions? Molly Wessler. Oh, she's right there. She's sitting there in her mask and coat. She's all bundled up. So everybody looks, wave. Molly's going to be taking over. Which we're very, very thankful for. The problem is her husband, Dan, is getting his doctorate, right, in choral direction at CU. And when he finishes, he's going to want to go work in that field somewhere. So who knows if that will take them away from here or not. But she stepped up to help. That's why I told her, really what I told Lori is you can go to as long until the Westlers have to leave. So you can be in Edinburgh till Dan gets a job. Nobody's really found that funny either, so I guess that should make you feel better. All right, our seniors continue to be an area of concern. I've shared with you for a number of years, even to the point right before COVID. I think you guys remember, but if you're new, I'll just try to quickly. Food for Hope started as an effort from the mayor of Thornton and some community leaders, the mayor of Thornton gathering us saying one of the biggest pressing issues that the government cannot solve in Thornton is our students at our schools who are on free lunch, we think they don't eat on the weekend. And Food for Hope started by her having that meeting, and leaders went and met with her, and Food for Hope was born out of that. Right before COVID, she got us together and said the next one is seniors, because they just don't have, one, the government doesn't have the money, but two, they don't even have a way to know really who's at risk. But they do believe that churches are one that can help people who are shut in and don't have enough to. I mean, we know the stories of seniors who are living on dog food because they don't. But again, no one knows, and so really trying to help with seniors. And so now COVID messed a bunch of stuff up. We were looking at a partnership with some stuff at Trailwinds, and now all the restrictions and everything has made everything on hold. But yeah.
I got texted a question.
Oh yeah.
From Pastor Mark. He's asking, how long a sabbatical do you want? 6 or 12 months?
You can tell that was a pastor who sent that. The elders have originally approved a 6 months. Yeah. Because notice he didn't make it even any shorter than that. So here's this senior ministry. In 2025, 1 in 5 Americans will be over 65. And by 2025, churches will need to operate senior ministry much like they do youth ministry. In other words, that's such a big portion of your demographics, you need a dedicated staff person to that. I haven't updated this over the last couple of years because I'm lazy. Someone else did this for me the first time, but I don't think that the range has changed that much. But you see the number of people who are over 60, the percentage it makes here at Summit. And at the time, another slide I didn't update. I should say Encore now, that's my fault. Encore members by age group back then, you see the see the breakout. So as we start looking at and talking to people, and even from our own personal experience here at Summit, that our first thing that we're going to do, and Pastor Mark is heading this up, is something called Memory Cafe. And it's a model he came across not too long ago, although at his old church in Wisconsin, they ran a really kind of cool big version of this, but for our purposes, this is going to be a once a week, a couple hour block where people suffering from memory loss and their caregivers bring them here. We do all these activities and things with the people suffering with memory loss, particularly this, the science is all out there about what stimulates it, art, music, that sort of thing. That's the other danger of echo chamber, right? But doing that, but then also a support group for caregivers, because if you've cared for someone with memory loss issues, you know how deeply, deeply hard that is. It's just a difficult thing. And like everything else, one of their first meetings they were supposed to do in January, and COVID, I think, messed that up, but we're still looking at getting that going, moving forward. So any questions at that point? All right. Returning to normal, we're looking at a couple of different things: the children's ministry, adult Bible study, Camp Summit, and addressing the sound system and hearing assist. So children's ministry. So I talked earlier on about the worry of people who haven't returned. But the stranger one to me is the young families. I understand why when we were doing everything virtual it was difficult and stuff like that. But I mean, prior to COVID, the children's message on 8 o'clock service would have 15 to 20 kids, and the 10:30 would have 20 to 40 kids. Half the time now, we don't even do it at 8 because there is a kid in the sanctuary, right? Or one of age to come forward. Lexi made high schoolers come up today so that she could do her children's message. I still like that idea. They can learn too. Yeah. And so again, this is unpacking what I had brought up more. So we're clearly offering programs that the parents decided once it was absent from their life was not worth resuming or bringing back, right? And that's a tough thing for me, right? Now, I try not to be too much prisoners of the moment, but also recognizing we're all, we've experienced what we've experienced, which leads us to think, right? I'm in almost the prime of my life. And when I say that, I don't mean health-wise. Yeah, you're looking at me like, no, you're not in the prime of your My girls both drive and run themselves to all their own activities, drive themselves to work, bring themselves to and from church. I don't have to be the Uber driver anymore. It's like, raise your hand if you join me. Well, okay, I'm not saying it's going to last forever, but at this moment, I'm like, hallelujah, right? I mean, it's just amazing. But it's not so long ago that I don't remember what that was like, okay? So I'm not trying to be dismissive of that, but it does. I mean, we are asking ourselves this question. It's caused real self-examination. What about it is that we're offering is not valuable. Now, on the other side of it, one of the decisions we made was Wednesday night continued to work even through COVID and continues to be of value, right? So I don't know if you know it, but one of the changes we've actually made is twice a month now, the Christian education portion of our youth ministry takes place on Wednesday nights, because that seems to be more tolerable than Sunday morning. And Sunday morning has largely become more, especially for high schoolers, more fellowship, right? Well, no, they're switched. But I mean, confirmation and the other grades are more, cross-training is more fellowship. Now, the high schoolers, the opposite, because they're always busy all the time. Not Sunday morning, though. We actually get better on that. So that's one place where we're kind of switched. So we're making some attempts, because obviously we believe that not just, remembering our sticky faith, not just incorporating knowledge to them, but Christian relationships from adults who aren't their parents is one of the most important things you can do, right? So we continue to try to look for ways to do that. So we're Bible studies up and going. If that's something that you missed, we find that of value and so have brought it back. Camp Summit took a hiatus. We were actually kind of wrestling with reimagining them anyway, and then we had COVID come along. And so you'll see more about that. We'll be in need of volunteers, but we found that to be, this is an example of where we think lining up what our community needs and us having an opportunity to provide it, but also then gives us an excuse to talk about Jesus, right? So Camp Summits you'll be hearing about. I originally didn't have this last one on there, considering where the budget is, but I thought it was important enough. So we got a bid, I don't know, was it in the summer or something, Katie? Because one of the things I don't know if discovered is the right word, but when we kind of revamped the tech booth and people returned to worship, they couldn't hear. And even right now, I mean, it still seems like it's a little echo, right? So we got a bid to replace the sound. Let's do it. How old are the speakers? Who wants to guess? It is 20-something, isn't it? Yeah, 20-something year old. How often do you update your home computer? Because there's new technology. 3 to 5 years. Yeah. Our board is we were surprised to learn 6 years old or something, right? So we got a bid right about $30,000 and that includes not only bringing in new ones, but they're not placed ideally, actually. I mean, this is actually a sound engineer, if you know anything about this. They come in and they do the timing, so you don't get, so that whole thing is $30,000. But we also want to add to it to finally deal with hearing assist. So for a long time, we were trying to save money to do the radio things in the floors that would transmit to hearing aids, $50,000. Luckily, it took us so long to do that. Technology has jumped that. So what we're still getting bids, but we want to look to add to the system. Basically, what it does is, how many of you have hearing aids and also an app on your phone? Yeah, so it'll broadcast to the app on your phone, and then you just act like you're listening. Anything, you adjust the volume, anything that's out of whack, you're using your phone to just use your own hearing aids. We'll still have our own listening assist if someone doesn't have hearing aids, but by and large, almost everybody's now does have an app. I remember one of the first times I was out with Dirk, we were at a church district convention, in fact. He had just gotten his hearing aids and he had his app on it, and he's all sitting there, and the pastors and people were listening to her being ridiculous, and I'm like, can you believe this? And he said, oh, I stopped listening a long time ago. I'm listening to music now. He had switched and just was using his hearing aids to jam out to music. And so you'll be able to do that during the sermon. If it gets boring, I guess, you'll just be like, forget this. And so we again, we're going to wrestle with what trends in the giving this year, that kind of stuff. We actually had half of it already donated. We had someone come forward last year, already give us half of that. But we would like to, it's just something we got to address. So, questions? Oh, look, I'm pretty good at this hour thing. Yep, Sarah, microphone, run. I guess you could just let me hold it and hand it to him. But.
I'd like to say just a few things. First of all, we came here because of Ray and Sally, but we stayed here because of you. And I should say also that looking at your budget and the value that SOP is producing from that value, you're getting real return on your money.
Yeah, I agree.
So congratulations to you, and continued God's blessings in your work.
Thanks.
On the issue of church attendance and that sort of thing, COVID has caused all churches to reevaluate metrics for how we're doing. And the holy grail of those metrics metrics is church health. Unfortunately, that's not a metric that's easily determined.
Yeah. Yep.
So how do you determine church health? And I think in the interim, you're still stuck with the metrics of nickels and noses. And your nickels are doing fine, and you're accepting the reality that the noses issue is a problem. And we're relatively new to this congregation, and at 80 years old, Lutherans, we've been to a lot of congregations. So I can speak honestly that your value per dollar is very high. I can also say that the attendance issue, or perhaps being rather bold to say that church attendance could be enhanced by also enhancing love vis-a-vis relationships. And Zoom is not a very good way to establish
Right.
relationships.
Yep.
And that's the one difference that we can get from Pastor Jacoby versus Zoom versus attendance, and that is there's no relationships in Zoom. There are relationships here, and when you're looking at formulating a program to increase attendance, the key to that, in my opinion, is relationship, because that's what you can get here that I can't get from watching your sermon.
Yep. And that's kind of connected to my areas of concern, right? Because again, I hope that I don't come off like I'm mad at the people who haven't come back, because that's not, I mean, whatever, I'm human, I guess I'm disappointed. But my bigger concern is for them, right? Because they need the relationship. Oh, I had promised I was going to say this before, now I forgot. So you've heard me say this for years. The reason why, if you only come and sit in the church pew and never engage anyplace else, is, and then disappear, is because the devil is a hyena or a pit. He cuts you from the herd. Step one is always cut you off from your community of faith. Step two, some challenge, tribulation, illness, divorce, job, something else in your life. And now you don't have your community of faith and you're under attack, right? Number one way. And what COVID has done is it's created a ton of those, right, who are cut off from the people who would love them and help them. And they're not sitting there saying, I don't need them. But we've created new habits. You know how long it takes to create